Let's continue our discussion of Emily Falk's book, What We Value. Today is the fifth part of our interpretation. We'll talk about a professional growth path. Or you could say, a kind of personal development path. That also represents a social niche, the information broker. Every organization, company, and even society needs a certain kind of person. Someone who connects people across departments, disciplines, and backgrounds. They might handle coordination, communication, or just informally keep track of who's doing what. When you have a problem, they know exactly who to talk to. That's an information broker. Information brokers occupy the structural holes in a social network. They are high-traffic hubs. If your work naturally places you in such a role, congratulations. You're more visible, especially to leadership, and statistically, you're more likely to get promoted or receive raises. But more importantly, because you frequently communicate with people from different backgrounds, you learn to see situations from multiple perspectives. You develop a deeper, more systemic understanding of how things work. And you become better at solving problems creatively and efficiently. Everyone, to some degree, needs the skills of an information broker. Even if the information isn't directly tied to your job, it will be useful somewhere else. Sooner or later. Falk cites research showing that, anyone who is trained to understand this role, who takes the initiative to learn what other departments are doing and builds a people information map of their organization, will see significant improvements in both performance ratings and promotion rates. The information broker role has always existed. Because information flow in any organization is never perfectly balanced. And neuroscience reveals two deep biases in our brains that make most people not think like information brokers. The first bias arises from the overlap between our social relevance system and our value system. We naturally overvalue our own group, the people in our small circle, our colleagues, our peers. Most people only know what's happening within their own department. Engineers rarely talk to designers rarely talk to marketers, and even when they do, they often don't speak the same language. Each group has its own vocabulary. And sometimes, their modes of thinking are almost reproductively isolated. We often say innovation comes from connecting ideas. But in reality, those connections rarely happen across departments. Steve Jobs worried about this problem at Pixar. He even designed the Pixar headquarters in a very odd way. With inconveniently located restrooms. Just to increase the odds that people from different teams would bump into each other. It barely worked. People still preferred to stay among their own kind. Even in a creative company like Pixar. This instinct to stick with similar people is deeply human. Our brains are wired that way. Studies show that the ability to categorize people and the ability to categorize objects use different brain systems. People are stored in the social cognition system, designed mainly for familiar faces. So, some people might classify insects with great precision, but ask them to describe who in their office does what. And they'll draw a blank. If you can categorize people as clearly as you categorize objects, if you can spot potential chemistry between them, that's a kind of superpower. The second bias is that, our brains naturally look upward. We pay more attention to people of higher social or economic status. In experiments, when two students talk, one from a higher social background, more confident and respected, and another from a lower background, the lower status student automatically starts looking up, carefully tracking every cue, trying to learn. The higher status student, meanwhile, often pays little attention to the other. We care more about the opinions of people above us, even if they're not actually competent. And we tend to ignore the insights of people below us, even when they hold crucial information. That, of course, damages efficiency. In another experiment, participants played a game similar to Werewolf, where they needed to find the hidden culprit. Each player held part of the information, and only by sharing clues could they solve the puzzle. Teams where the leader actively asked the subordinates for input performed far better. But in most cases, the leaders didn't bother. And even when subordinates volunteered their clues, team performance dropped dramatically. Even temporary, randomly assigned leaders developed a sense of authority. Neuroscientists can see this on fMRI scans. When someone is primed to feel high status, the brain's empathy-related areas become less active, while the self-reward areas become more active. In short, I'm important. I can just enjoy my status. I don't need to care what others think. We've discussed this before. This is what scientists call power-induced brain damage. It's evolutionarily convenient. In every tribe, the leader's words carry weight. Subordinates have to understand the leader, not the other way around. Leaders still have functioning social cognition. They're still guessing what others think. But they stop verifying whether their guesses are correct. Ideally, an organization's decisions should reflect both top-down intentions and bottom-up realities. But because of the two biases we just described, group self-focus and upward attention, information gets blocked and distorted. The longer someone stays in power, the less they hear. The longer departments stay siloed, the less they understand each other. That's exactly where the information broker becomes essential. If you can move between teams, connect information islands, and build bridges of understanding, your organization needs you. And if you can understand each person's perspective and way of thinking, that's true leadership. Now, does this mean only extroverts can become information brokers? Not at all. Falk points out that most information brokers don't look like social butterflies. They tend to speak softly, act thoughtfully, and listen more than they talk. But they share one crucial trait: curiosity. They genuinely want to know what others are doing and thinking. They care about different perspectives. Not to please or impress, but simply to understand. Curiosity solves the efficiency problem. Falk suggests that besides following mainstream sources in your field, you should also explore niche podcasts, fringe topics, and interdisciplinary discussions. You might think that's inefficient. Too much information, too scattered. But curiosity has its own compass. The things that make you curious are often exactly what you need. And power naturally suppresses curiosity. The higher a person's status, the less curious they become. You have to consciously fight that tendency. Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, had a strategy for this. Every week, he invited 12 random frontline employees to lunch. He didn't give speeches. He just asked questions. Through that, he heard unfiltered insights that no board report could deliver. One of those lunches inspired him to revamp Disney's entire queue system. The greater your power, the more deliberately you must nurture curiosity. I've met a few people in Silicon Valley who could be called professional information brokers. They're known as connectors. If you need an investor, a founder, an engineer, or a scientist, they know someone. Or know someone who does. It feels like they know everyone, and everyone knows them. When I'm not writing, I sometimes do a bit of this myself. Mainly through conversations. I've spoken with engineers, entrepreneurs, investors, scientists, even policymakers. They're incredibly generous with their insights. About how their companies work, how technologies develop, what's happening in the AI world. As one friend put it, in Silicon Valley, if you ask me for advice, I'll tell you everything I know. Even if I have to make it up on the spot. From them, I've learned a lot. Sometimes, when business delegations from China visit and ask me to give a talk, I end up learning from them. They tell me stories about what's happening back home. The kind of ground-level reality you'll never see on Twitter or in the news. For example, after February 2025, the mood in China's startup scene became completely different from the second half of 2024. Something you could only feel in person. In the AI era, information brokers are becoming even more vital. The most valuable, in-depth information doesn't always make it online. Often, people don't want it online. It spreads person to person. Today's information brokers are like the intellectuals of the past. Exchanging ideas face-to-face, in salons, cafes, and dinner conversations. If you want to play the role of an information broker, here are a few principles. First, every piece of information is tied to a person. In logic, who says something doesn't matter. Only whether it's true or false. But in real life, who says it matters a lot. Context, background, and motivation shape meaning. So whether you're a scientist, engineer, or businessperson, if you want to operate effectively, you must first know the people in your field. Who they are, what they're working on, what they want, what they're good at, what their limitations are. Even their personalities and rivalries. It's like understanding the martial arts world. You need to know the main schools and masters. Second, be generous. Information doesn't get used up when shared. If something might help someone, tell them. If you know who's perfect for a task, make the introduction. Third, pay attention to first-hand information. Anything fresh, before it hits the internet, straight from the source, is valuable. That's how new narratives begin. And finally, be a cross-domain translator. Can you explain a technical insight in business language? Can you help a product manager understand an engineer's logic? Or an investor understand a scientist's reasoning? If you truly understand something, you can. That's it for today's content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.